City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded July 1st, 2024.
All right, I have 6 o'clock. We will call the regular meeting of the City Plan Commission to order. Director Karnowski, can I get a roll call, please?
Leza.
Here.
Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Beacom.
Here.
Muskoviak.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
And Schuler is excused.
So we do have a quorum. We will continue. Let me share the PowerPoint here before we get too far into it. Our zoning administrator does a fabulous job with the PowerPoints, so we're going to use them. All right, item number 2 is the report of the June 3rd meeting of the City Plan Commission. Those meetings, minutes and actions were included in your packet.
Move to approve.
Moved by Arnson,
Second.
seconded by Rice. Discussion.
I just have a question. I don't know if it makes a difference, but sometimes if you're excused, it says excused,
Oh,
absent.
yes, right, and they
Since-
both should be excused. It's listing Commissioner Beacom and Kneebone as absent. Please change that to excused. They did call in advance, let us know that they weren't going to be able to attend, so that is excused. With that change, the motion is to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is a public hearing and action on a request from Norman Myers Jr., representing Point Paradise Family LP, for a conditional use permit to operate a non-owner occupied tourist rooming house on the property located at 1316 Ellis Street, with the parcel identified in your packet, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 1, Sub F, Sub 3, Sub I. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. As the Mayor mentioned, the request is to operate a non-owner occupied tourist rooming house within the former rectory located on the property, and I'll have the Mayor just for if he wants to circle the rectory, just so point of emphasis for the folks on the commission, just to know the general location of the building, where the proposed short-term rental would be located. So non-owner occupied tourist rooming house means that the property owner would not be residing on the property at the time where the short-term rental use is occurring. As folks on the commission know, there's been a lot of back and forth conversation about short-term rentals for a number of years now. Essentially, within our zoning code, non-owner occupied tourist rooming houses are allowed via a conditional use permit starting within the R4 multiple family 1 residence district. This property is zoned R5 multiple family 2 residential, and by the nature of how our zoning code is structured, this use would be allowed by way of a conditional use permit on the property. So on the next slide, there's a litany of conditions on staff's recommendation to approve. It's pretty cookie cutter conditions. Anytime that there's a short-term rental use that's proposed, there's a number of deliverables that's needed. Deliverables being a zoning permit issued from our department, lodging permit issued by county health department, making sure that applicable health codes are met, submittal of local lodging tax payments either to us or through a registered marketplace provider as designated by the Department of Revenue. So those conditions are outlined on the screen, and staff would recommend approval.
Quick question before we get started. There are, on this parcel, there is outstanding property maintenance concerns with a building on the same parcel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any clarifying questions from the commissioners before I open up the public hearing? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just what portion of the property is being intended to be rented out as separate residential structure, or is there a partition space within the primary kind of former church structure?
It would be the, what was formerly the rectory. So this building is standalone, but on the same parcel as the church and the fellowship hall. There's multiple buildings on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other clarifying questions before I open up the public hearing?
This doesn't have any multiple principal structure issues or anything with the zoning change or with the change?
That would be a question for our zoning administrator.
That would have been addressed back in 2020 as part of the conditional use permit request to operate a single-family residential use within the church portion. If my memory serves me right, that conversation was included as part of the conditional use permit request back in the day.
Okay, I remember talking about this, I don't remember specifics.
Two clarifying, one, the orders that you referenced, those are on the church, not the structure that's being applied for. And the other question I have is that the church, would that ever become eligible for this usage based on the zoning that when it converted to residential?
To answer your last question, yes, if the property owner would seek to expand the confines of the short-term rental use within the church, then he would have to go back before this commission for approval.
So anytime you expand, if the conditional use permit is approved tonight and ultimately approved at council, anytime you expand that conditional use permit, our code requires that it comes back before this body. So if they were to turn a portion of the church, of the former church, and do an Airbnb, they'd have to come back before this body. Any expansion of that conditional use permit requires that. As it relates to the orders, there is an outstanding order on the church steeple itself. The steeple is in very poor shape. And you might have noticed if you're a walker, if you've driven by, that the city has closed the sidewalk adjacent to the steeple because of that concern. Shingles are falling off. We just want to protect the public's interest. We are working with the property owner to address those concerns and are hopeful to have some resolution in the near future as it relates to that order. But there's no order on the specific building that we're talking about, the former rectory, that, as far as we understand, is pretty much clear and free of any violations.
Anything else before I open the public hearing? Yes.
If there were issues, the health inspector or the county inspector would probably pick up on that. So, yeah, that would be the only thing I'd be concerned about, if there were issues that we don't know about, getting them the permit.
Yeah, there is a requirement that the county does go through the Airbnb or proposed Airbnb, and any violations before they would issue a tourist rooming house permit would have to be resolved. So things like appropriate smoke detectors, ensuring that there's fire extinguishers in appropriate places, things of that nature is what the county looks at as well.
Thank you.
Okay, City Attorney, I saw you walk into the room. You want to speak before or after the public hearing? Or neither? Good. All right. Then I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this request, step forward or signify online that you wish to speak. Public hearing remains open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, thoughts, comments, or a motion?
I'll move approval of the conditional use permit with staff
Okay.
recommendations.
Motion by Rice, seconded by Arnson.
Second it.
Discussion there.
I do have a question. Could we put a condition on the repair being done before, I guess, occupancy or before final approval, or,
Well, they are separate buildings.
but same
Do
property?
you recall when the orders expire on the church steeple, when that has to be fixed by?
It's the end of
Sometime this month.
Yeah, end of July, if I'm not mistaken, or sometime this month. I think that's, we typically, when there's a violation on a building, 95% of properties in the city, if they're residential or if residential uses have one building and like a detached garage, we've historically, if there's orders on the garage, if they pull a permit to do electrical or plumbing work in the house, we've not, prevented them from doing that. In this case, where you've got some commercial components with a residential use, I don't know how to address that other than by saying, if staff was concerned about the rectory, we would not recommend approval, but because we believe the rectory is in decent enough shape to at least go through this process, that's why it's before you. I think tying the two together might not be as advantageous as one might think.
Have we actually been able to inspect the rectory? We look at the outside of buildings, that's typically how our inspections go, but were there any permits pulled or anything? Do we have any idea what the inside condition is like?
We don't, and that would be something that the county would take care of, yeah. And if there are violations as it relates to the building, the county would make us aware of that. And of course, we can withhold, issuing the conditional use permit if there are violations found on the rectory. Again, I think the issue with the steeple is a long-standing one. Those that go back a number of years understand that that's part of the reason that the church that was there vacated that space. It's been an ongoing challenge, and I think tying the two together is again, not as advantageous as one might think.
Yeah. And in your opinion, then, the two buildings, even though they're on the same parcel, separate uses, the steeple poses, or the condition of the steeple doesn't pose any risk to what I'll call the rectory. It's not a rectory anymore.
Yeah, no, we don't have any concerns there.
This probably would have been a clarifying question, but the 4 or 5 bedroom, does Health and Human Services follow what the same city requirements would be for occupancy for Airbnb? And does our ordinance dictate that at all as far as how many people they can have?
No, the county will dictate the number of persons based on their own square footage, and it's a state-based calculation. The definition of family is actually, tourist rooming houses are excluded specifically within the definition of family. Okay. So because it's a short-term rental, they don't fall under that long-term rental requirements, which, would identify no more than 2 or 3 unrelated persons living at the property.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Comments from the audience? Anyone else? Seeing and hearing none, the motion is to approve the conditional use with staff recommended conditions. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Then number 4 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Brent Gerber, representing Point Plaza LLC, to amend the adopted conceptual plan for planned development for the property located at 1800 Maria Drive with the parcel identified in your packet, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 1, Sub B, Sub 10. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. So if we jump over to the next slide, the image on the left-hand side of the screen shows the current development pattern for the former Kmart site. This would include the reserve student housing complex, the area kind of in an L-shaped pattern, the property where Cousin Subs is located, Tommy's Car Wash is located, and the landlocked parcel just to the north of the student housing complex. So as I mentioned, the historic use of the property rather was that of Kmart convenience store back in the late 2010s when the city was working with the developer at the time to raise the building and spur some new development for this corridor, or for this area rather. We did go through a process of rezoning the parcel to planned development. As part of any rezoning to planned development, there's multiple steps that need to occur, not only just the rezoning of the parcel, but also approving a conceptual plan. So what's the desired development pattern for the area in question? So there's been some backstory, some changes over the years. So April 2018 was the first conceptual plan that was approved. That's the middle image on the screen. That was amended in about 1 year later in May of 2019, and then again amended as recently as end of 2021 to allow for the development of Cousin Subs and Tommy's Car Wash. So on the left-hand side of the screen shows, again, just on the next slide, shows a snippet of our zoning code outlining the approval process for rezoning a parcel to planned development. Specifically for the purpose of this agenda item, there are specific parameters in our zoning code that allows for staff to approve deviations from that adopted conceptual plan. Really the kicker in question here as to why amending the conceptual plan is needed is due to the change in approved setbacks that's being requested. And if we go on the next slide, I'll actually spend a little time going over the proposed site plan. Really the kicker for why a change in setbacks is being requested is due to the applicant's request to split the subject parcel so that there's one apartment complex on each lot. And with that splitting of the parcel, that's what triggers the change in setbacks from what was approved back in 2018 to what's before you all tonight. So a little bit about the site plan that you see on the screen. You show the proposed building on the, more on the right-hand side of the site plan, housing approximately 67 units in total. You see there is really the change in terms of parking would be the one parking row just to the south of the building, along with the parking lot in between the existing building and the proposed building. The row of parking stalls to the north, that's already existing. The one thing I'll note, just since that's going to be important for both this item and the next agenda item, as it relates to the splitting of the parcel. As you can see, the area where the dashed black lines are located, that's the proposed parcel split, that's proposed parcel boundary. As you can see, that's technically landlocked. It doesn't have any direct access. It doesn't directly abut, rather, Maria Drive right away. As much as our zoning code at times can be outdated in terms of today's wants, needs, desires, I think this project embodies really a lot of different ways, a lot of different provisions in our zoning code that allows for some flexibility, especially as it relates to housing development. In the case of splitting the parcel, our zoning code allows for parcels to either have direct street frontage on a city right-of-way or allows access by way of a private driveway, so long as that access contains at least 60 feet in lot width. And this parcel more than fivefolds that 60 lot width requirement. So the next slide, really the purpose of the the conceptual plan amendment in part is to outline specific deviations from zoning code requirements that the applicant is proposing. And as part of it, there are 3 deviations of note. The first one relating to lot density based off of the proposed number of units and the amount, the proposed number of units. I believe I have it in the report. It was somewhere around 90,000 some odd square feet, whereas the proposed lot size would be just shy over 50,000 square feet. So the first deviation would be a deviation from density requirements. Second deviation would be pertaining to pavement setback along the east, west, and south lot lines. And then the last one relates more to our sign code. There is in the civil plan notation for wall signage on the building. Because of this proposed lot split technically being a landlocked parcel, this is one scenario where our zoning code and our sign code does not mesh with one another. We're under a literal application of our sign code, 0 square feet of wall signage would be permitted. So consistent with what our sign code requires rather for plan development projects, that's listed as one of the deviations before you tonight. So staff's recommendation is to approve with those deviations that I mentioned, and we do have a number of folks from the development team online as well.
Okay, before I open up the public hearing, are there any clarifying questions from the commission? Yes, sir.
So I appreciate Adam gave some background on just the history of this development, and it did get to be kind of convoluted. What about the incentives? You know, initially, I think there was $2.1 million from the city, and the parcel had to meet certain tax goals set, I believe, at that time. I know that this has been split off with the commercial and residential. What's the status as far as the incentives, what's been met, and where things stand now?
It's not relevant to this conversation. I'd hate to say that, but this is just for the proposed plan. This body doesn't review any development agreements. It's for the physical development of the city. But I'm more than happy to answer that outside of this meeting, Mr. Beacom.
Yeah, and I think that's probably best because this is just a conditional, a modification of the developer's conceptual plan. It would be outside of the parameters to talk about it right now, but the director will answer your questions, and we can certainly have those available for any of the alderpersons that want it at the common council meeting in 2 weeks. Anything else before I open the public hearing? Yes, Mr. Rice?
I guess just one quick one. What's preventing the new parcel from extending all the way to Maria Drive?
That is due to the shared access off of Maria, and that was a request from the development team to keep that 2 access points, having that be retained with the existing apartment complex.
Okay, and Commissioner Moscoviac?
How might not having frontage on Maria affect the addressing of the property?
It would still be addressed as Maria Drive, likely just spitballing, probably 1808, most likely.
Do we have a total number of parking spots that would be in each of these parcels when split?
So as it relates to this proposed use, technically there's no minimum parking standards or minimum parking requirements off the street. With that said, I have it in the staff report. I believe it came out to be about 0.8 some odd parking stalls per unit within the building.
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, anything else before I open the public hearing? Public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony is urged to either step forward or signify online that you wish to speak. Public hearing remains open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing and hearing no one wishing to speak, we will close the public hearings and bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes? Alderman Ebon?
I will move approval, subject to staff recommendations, and
Okay. Do we have a second? Seconded by Arnson. Discussion there.
I guess that my only potential concern it would be kind of just long-term disputes over that parcel boundary. It's very non-traditional. You can have potentially at some point two adjacent properties with kind of a convoluted boundary, arguably some convoluted parking. Does city staff have any concerns about that, just in terms of kind of enforcement and having to deal with some of that long-term?
Short answer, no, in large part because there is an existing shared access agreement that covers parking, both for the driveway to the east of the proposed building, along with the parking lot surrounding it. So any disputes, any questions would be subject to the agreed upon language as part of that agreement.
Is that parking agreement, is that registered somewhere? Is that part of a deed? I've seen properties with a shared driveway access in the deed. Is this the same way?
Yeah, I believe it's a separate deed that was recorded
Yeah.
a number of years ago, probably 4 years ago. So it's a separate agreement document that's with the Register of Deeds, so it stays with the property.
Okay. Does that help?
Sure.
I get it. I mean, it looks weird, but ultimately, property boundary disputes are civil matters and not really brought to and through the city. But I see your point, and I had personal experience where weird things happen with things that aren't officially recorded, signed, documented, and available in 20 years, for example. So, all right, Commissioner Moscoviac.
Could you walk me through the accessibility to this property by vehicle, and which corridors can they access and exit the property to access that parking lot?
Yeah, a couple routes would be shared driveway to the east of the building. A second access point would be that shared driveway between the existing student housing building and Cousin Subs, Tommy's Car Wash, kind of that area in there. A third one would be just to the north of Tommy's Car Wash.
Can you point those out to me on the graphic?
Yeah, so the first one would be the shared driveway to the east of the proposed building, running north-south, right there.
This is that.
The second access point would be between the existing student housing building and Cousin Subs and Tommy's Car Wash up in there. So folks could, if they're on Maria, hook up north and then take a right going eastbound, link up into this parking area. Plus there's an access point. This would be north of Tommy's Car Wash that also leads into this area as well. So there's 3 access points in total, 2 off of Maria, 1 off of Division Street North.
And really, if you wanted to, I don't know if there's any existing agreements, but there's this access that goes into, like McDonald's is here,
Yep, and that,
big Subway market, not Subway anymore, it's Rocky Rococo's, GameStop,
Yep.
or Gaming Generations rather, they're all in here, and there is access to Division Street off of that up there too.
So just for the commissioners, if you pull your agenda packet to page 52, it's C4, it's the utility plan. That actually shows a number of the easements and access agreements that exist on the property. And so you'll see, there's a 35-foot wide access easement per CSM. That's a document that's been recorded. That's the McDonald's access, we'll call it, that the mayor had mentioned. There's also another access easement. It's a 24-foot Maria Drive shared driveway easement. There's a document number recorded there as well. That's the one that's between the existing student housing, the Tommy's Car Wash, the Cousin Subs, and the commercial building on the south corner of that as well. So if you can read it, and I'm having a bit of a hard time reading it, but that is a document that does explain a number of the easements that exist for utilities, for parking, and for access as well.
When we have these documents brought in, they're this size. Getting them on an 8.5 by 11 is challenging, so sometimes it's easier if you look at the documents online where you can zoom in.
I mean, obviously, in a perfect world, you would have frontage on a street. In this case, because you've got, in our zoning code, this exception to that rule, I'm not 100% certain what the purview of the commission is to deviate from existing adopted ordinance. I think that would be my only, hesitation. But, it could be something that you at least ask of the developer is could they work on extending that lot line further south to meet up with Maria Drive? That would be something that I think is totally appropriate and staff would support, at least in asking that question of the developer. But because it's already codified in zoning code that we allow parcels that are not immediately adjacent to public right-of-way, I'm not certain that we can deviate too far from that.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? Yes, sir.
One more on accessibility. And looking at the landscape plan, there's plans for 1 bicycle rack. Is that right? For 67 units?
that is a condition on the site plan review. So 2 items later saying that basically the proposed bicycle parking has to meet the minimum quantity, location, and design standards. So.
And Commissioner, you'll see this come up occasionally. I know they're relatively new to the commission, but have an extensive background. We have to follow processes, one before the other. So the, what was it, item number 6? Yeah, item number 6 is the site plan review. This is just adopting or rejecting, of course, the conceptual plan.
Sure, okay.
But a very good point.
I think it's just probably worthwhile too for newer folks to the commission and who might be listening at home. The planned development district is its own zoning district, essentially. You are allowed to do things that deviate from the traditional zoning code that we enforce in the Community Development Office. That, of course, requires a number of different steps, the first of which being the conceptual plan that's before you this evening. The concept is the greater good that would come from a change or a slight amendment, if you will, to the existing zoning code for development is greater than enforcing the 1979 zoning code as is. So it isn't uncommon, especially for our higher density developments, to come through as planned development districts. Think Northside Yard is a planned development district. Great Northern Distilling is a planned development district. The Banter Apartments on Division Street is a planned development district. So being flexible with the developer, recognizing that there's a greater good here and that higher densities in this corridor is an important piece of, just maintaining housing affordability, addressing some of the ideas that, maybe more people will be likely to use public transit or bicycling as opposed to, vehicles, and that's why you see the 0.85 stalls per unit. So things like that are things that we take into consideration. But once that planned development district is solidified, they have to meet the minimum standards of that planned development district. As Adam mentioned, we've gone through a few different iterations in this area with a few different developers, and obviously the Three Leaf team is a different developer than who actually developed the reserve student housing, and the folks who did the student housing are actually different from the gentleman who applied for the student housing. So we try to work within the confines, but also being cognizant of the built environment that is around it in order to make the most logical site plan that might come before you. So I think that's just a quick overview of what a planned development district is.
So what I'm hearing is there is another opportunity to talk about the issues that I brought up.
Yes, item number 6.
Yes.
You can talk about bike parking.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments from the audience or online? We do have a motion in a second, right?
We do.
It was Kneebone and Arnson?
Kneebone and Arnson, correct.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that's approved. Item number 5. Ooh, I gotta get back to where it was. Item number 5 is a public hearing and action on a request from Brett Gerber, representing Point Plaza LLC, for a conditional use permit to construct multi-unit apartment building on the property located at 1800 Maria Drive with parcel identified in your packet, consistent with Chapter 23.02 sub 2 sub F sub 5 sub A. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. So not only is this parcel zone plan development, it also falls within the BTID 5 overlay district. It's an overlay district codified in our zoning ordinance that matches the boundary of TIF district number 5. So within our zoning code, I just want to start out talking about the proposed land use. So within the, per the plan development zoning of the property, a multifamily residential use is classified as a conditional use. However, within the BTID 5 overlay district, a multifamily residential use is classified as a permitted use. So if you look on the next slide on the upper right-hand side, our zoning code addresses situations like this where if a use is listed as both conditional and permitted on a given property, that use shall automatically become permitted by right. So in the context of this conditional use permit request, it's not about the proposed land use because the proposed land use is permitted by right. Rather, the purpose for this conditional use permit focuses on the proposed setback off of the south lot line. Within the BTID 5 overlay district, there's some differing setback requirements than that of any other zoning districts within our property. And the specific thing of note is from the south lot line, there is a minimum of 0 feet of setback that's required, maximum of 25 feet, and within the proposal, 34 feet of setback is proposed rather. As we talked about last agenda item, this is technically a landlocked parcel. However, our zoning code talks about in this instance that south lot line shall be treated as essentially the street lot line in this instance. So that minimum 0 feet, maximum 25 feet would be based off of that south lot line. So the purpose of this conditional use permit request is simply to allow for a setback from the south lot line greater than 25 feet. That's the maximum that's allowed. Staff doesn't see any hesitations as it relates to this request. It's pretty similar to some of the other plan development projects that's occurred on streets not fronting Division Street North. These would be projects like Burger King, Taco John's, etc. So staff would recommend approval.
Okay. This is also a public hearing, so before I open that, are there any more clarifying questions from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this request, step to the lectern or signify that you wish to speak if you're online, and we'll hear that. Public hearing remains open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing and hearing no one else wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed, bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'll move approval of the conditional use.
Motion by Rice.
Second.
Seconded by Muskoviac. Discussion. Comments from the audience or online? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
The need
Arnson.
for the increased setback is to accommodate the parking stalls and drive on the south side of the building? Is that what I'm seeing?
Correct, that row of parking stalls. Yeah.
Comments from the audience or online? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that's approved. Item number 6 is a request from Brent Gerber representing Point Plaza LLC for a site plan review to construct a multiple-unit apartment building on a property located at 1800 Maria Drive with the parcel identified in your packet consistent with our Chapter 23 zoning code. Before we go too far, Commissioner Muskoviac, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to see more accessibility. It's billed as an accessible property in the heart of walkable and bikeable downtown. I think it'd be a reasonable expectation that it has access to bicycle racks to accommodate its residents.
Okay, so you are asking for some additional bicycle racks. Did you have a number in mind or a ballpark or a range? 67 units.
The staff mentioned recommendations or a minimum requirement. Could you inform me what that minimum requirement would be for this property?
Yeah, so the minimum would be based off of the number of on-site parking stalls that's provided, and I'm just gonna quick pull up our zoning code offhand. So it would be a minimum in this case of 6 parking stalls, 6 bike parking spaces rather, is
For
what
67 units?
it's because it's based off of the number of vehicle parking spaces. And since they're providing, this is one of the things I think is a conundrum.
I think it warrants at least a discussion on our ordinances, but you could certainly ask for more. It's 67 units. I don't think half of that is unreasonable.
All right.
Like if you wanted to
The
require
intention for this property is low-income housing. Who would expect to reside in? What would be like the expected income, the expected demographic?
I'll defer to the applicant who's on the,
Any of the applicants online wishing to speak representing Pointer Plaza?
Hi, good evening. Carol Keene, Real Estate Director for Impact 7. Indeed, this is an affordable housing community providing 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, serving households with 30, 50, and 60% county median income at the development. And if you'd like an idea of what those that means and the average amount, I could provide that to you. For example, I'm sorry, hang on one second, I'm just getting the
Could you speak on behalf of the developer in regards to their willingness to add 30 spots for bicycle parking?
We are more than happy to evaluate your request. I would defer to the architect to confirm that we have the space appropriate to accommodate that request. As you can see, the site is quite tight, but we would be more than happy to maximize the number of parking spaces as space allows.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be a reasonable expectation for something that's considered affordable housing and accessible to also accommodate the ability to access bicycles to get to work or go places, especially with its proximity to Green Circle Trail and other bike facilities that the city has recently implemented. So 30 stalls seems like a reasonable accommodation.
Okay. Let me ask you this, Director. Do we have the authority to make that a requirement right now? Or should we postpone action on this site plan review until they can come up with a suitable plan for those requested 30 bicycle parking spots.
It's totally within the purview of this body. If you'd like to have that number of, specific number of stalls, you can definitely require that as part of the site plan approval.
Then, Commissioner, I would ask that you motion to amend the site plan review to include a minimum of 30 bicycle parking spots, if that was your wish.
Are we still in a phase of this meeting where we're just asking for clarification, or are we at the next phase to offer a motion?
You are at the phase where you could certainly offer a motion. And we have Ally, who has her hand raised. Ally, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Ally Copid. I represent Corb Architecture, the architect and designer for the project. While I love the idea of 30 spaces and we are happy to accommodate as much as we can, I just would like to understand or be sure that the space remaining on the site can accommodate the minimum bicycle parking size that is required in the zoning code with the space that we have available.
Okay, and in your professional opinion, is that, you have concerns there?
I do have concerns in my professional opinion.
So you don't think there's enough room on site to accommodate 30 bicycles?
I would like to evaluate it,
Okay.
and so that we could make we can make an appropriate recommendation.
Okay, so we could certainly postpone action on that if you'd like until they have the ability to use their professionals to see how that would look. Commissioner Beacom, did you have a
Yeah, you have
comment?
67 units, and I apologize, but she said 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. Do we know how many beds total are planned for this parcel?
Yeah, I got it in front of me.
Director's going to look that up.
So one-bedroom units are 27, two-bedroom is 29, and then three-bedroom is 11.
So 33. Who did the math? 86 beds or bedrooms.
Give that again.
Okay.
What was that again, please?
27 single, 29 double, 11 triple.
58. No, you are way off.
118.
There are, yeah, 29 two-bedroom units is 58 bedrooms. 11 at 3 is 33. That's 91 plus the 27 singles. That's right. It was a good effort. So we're looking at 108 bedrooms,
118.
or 118 bedrooms.
So potentially 57 parking spaces for 118.
Yes. So if that's the wish of the commission, to postpone action on this and bring it back, ask them to bring back a site plan that has at least 30 bicycle parking spots.
I'll request for postponement until the developer is able to come up with information concerning the availability for bike racks.
Second.
Okay? Seconded by Beacom. Discussion on the motion to postpone. Commissioners, anything?
I'm just wondering, is this something we could defer to staff, say staff, knowing these concerns, could work with the developer and work it out after they hear from the developer and what they suggest?
You could, but that wouldn't be a requirement then. That would be a suggestion.
All right.
I mean,
Good point.
quite frankly, you could just require 30 bicycle parking areas, 30 stalls, if you will.
But the developer's asking for more time too, so.
Yeah, I mean, that, which is reasonable. So if you're going to postpone, before we would take a vote, I would ask if there's anything else you'd like to see. So we don't just get hung up on the bike parking component.
Okay, before we get too far on that, Alderperson Guthrie,
I'm happy to exhaust the commissioners first.
go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Jackie Guthrie, Alder, District 2, 2700 Peck Street. I appreciate bringing up bike parking. It seems lacking. I would further request to see covered bike parking. The reality of storing a bike outside in Wisconsin makes it uncomfortable to ride, and they kind of fall into disrepair more easily. I think it would be great for the residents of this community if they had covered bike parking. So I would appreciate the good folks who are going to put their heads back together to explore bike parking, to look at covered bike parking. I also wanted to express some concerns about the ratio of, or the number of 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments in this construction. My understanding, I am a layman, but my understanding is that there is significant need for family low-income housing in our community. I understand that we also have some folks who fall into need of single-bedroom apartments, but only 11 3-bedroom apartments makes me worried about this project falling short of meeting the ratio or the needs of our community. So I would welcome additional conversation about that topic and would love to see any data that suggests that this is the right number of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments for this space. I yield.
Thank you. Alderperson Kiemer.
Ginger Kiemer, Alder for District 3. I guess I would defer to the architect and staff, but I wonder if one other possible alternative to accommodate bike parking, if seeing that the site, like floor, the amount of square footage available on site is limited, is if there's possibility for interior bike storage inside the building that could accommodate, which again would help with bikes in the winter. So perhaps if there's not room for 30 bikes outdoors, perhaps there's room for interior bike storage as well.
Okay. Any other comments from the audience? Before we vote on the motion, as Director Karnowski asked, is there any other concerns regarding the site plan that we would like the developer to take into consideration?
I mean, I think Alder Kiemer brought up the point. I know Northside Yards has inside bike parking. That's probably up to theirs. Parking's just going to be a concern for me for any of these new developments. 58 for 118 doesn't seem like enough based on what I see at Northside Yards. So, you know, I don't know how we come up with a 0.85. The city used to use 1 per bed, and now we're 0.85 per unit. It helps with the development, but I don't know if it's realistic for where we live.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. The parking restrictions have been evaluated recently because of a movement to maybe use alternative sources of transportation. It's one thing to ask people not to take a car. It's quite different than actually doing it. And you're seeing that at Northside Yard, right? There are no parking requirements in that downtown area. Where we're told occasionally that people prefer bicycles or whatever other mode of transportation. It'd be nice if we had a more robust public transportation system. But the fact is, you can ask all you want, and ask the university. You know, they don't even want freshmen bringing cars onto campus, but that happens, and it will continue to happen. People choose the mode of transportation they want. So I share your concerns about the number of parking spots, but the number of bicycle parking spots, I think, is something that needs to be brought up too, especially because these are lower income units. And boy, if I don't have the money, I'm certainly not investing in a car because that's a heavy expense. So offering that ability to have another form of transportation that's less expensive, I think should be a priority. So we have some concerns about the number of parking units in general. We have concerns about the ratio of units to bedrooms, and then the desire to have at least 30 parking spots for bikes, preferably covered. Allie, your hand is still up. Did you wish to speak?
Yes, I did want to speak again. Thank you. So I wanted to just make sure that we have the opportunity to work with Adam or whoever from the city, talking with our development partner. You know, there's certain requirements in the bike parking placement that might not be able to be met in order to approach 30 bike parking stalls. For example, there is the one space that we can see offhand would be at the north end of the building. That would be more than 120 feet from the front entrance as a requirement of bike parking placement. So I guess our question would be, is there somebody that we could work with to make sure that we are meeting the intent and possibly not the letter of the zoning code?
Okay.
And I'll add, chime in, Ally, to that. Within our bike parking ordinance, it does allow for myself as zoning administrator to grant deviations from what's outlined in our bike parking requirements. So specific, the location of the bike parking facilities being 120 feet from the main entrance. That's something that, if can't fit all 30 bike parking spaces within 120 feet and you want to try to disperse that around the building, that's something that the zoning code allows me to grant that administrative variance for you folks.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, so the motion is to postpone action on this and allow the developer to work with their professionals, bring back a revised site plan with addressing some of the concerns that were brought up tonight. If you are in favor of postponing, signify aye. If you're opposed, no. We'll call the vote. All those in favor of postponing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the postponement is approved. Hopefully we'll be able to take a look at that next month. Item number 7 is the request from the city of Stevens Point to acquire an unaddressed parcel bounded by State Highway 66. Director.
Fairly straightforward request. There's a vacant parcel.
Did I miss? Oh, hang on. Did I miss one? No, I didn't miss one.
That was from the site plan review.
Gotcha. There we go.
There's a vacant parcel that's adjacent to well number 11. Well number 11 is our newest municipal well. It's off of Highway 66. The parcel that is shaded in orange or yellow is the one that we're discussing more specifically. That parcel existed prior to the current wellhead protection ordinance, and so if somebody were to acquire that and build a home with a well and septic right on top of one of our wellheads, that is something that they're able to do. In fact, that was a request that came through a few months ago that thankfully that sale didn't go through, and the city is now interested in acquiring this for preservation of wellhead number 11. So the utilities department is asking for this. They would be the ones to actually acquire it and use their own funds for that purpose. So this is before you. Staff does recommend approval as presented.
And especially for Commissioner Moscoviak, the state statutes require that the Plan Commission make a recommendation to the council on the acquisition and disposition of land. Just because we're in charge of the planning portion, we want to make sure that we're doing, council is doing that in accordance with our plans. So this is just a recommendation to council to either approve purchasing it or recommend not purchasing it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beacom.
I would make a motion to approve acquisition.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Arnson. Discussion there? Comments from the audience or online?
Is there data about the Portage County groundwater recharge zones?
There is. Actually quite extensive
I
data.
imagine this is in the heart of that.
This is right in our well. So you can see the shaded area. Our well is right there. The water, groundwater is flowing generally from north to south in this area. So
Zone A, right?
it's
Yeah, so Zone A exists, and it's the most restrictive wellhead protection zone. So you've got your standard zoning, and then you've got the wellhead protection layer on top of that. When you fall within Zone A, B, or C, there are special provisions. There's some things that are prohibited within various zones, just depending on how close you are. So this does have a recharge area. Everything that's in the recharge area is Zone A. And I can send you that specific data. We've got some really good modeling that we have that we can show you. But obviously, the zoning code has a provision that if the lot was created prior to the current wellhead protection ordinance, that if somebody wanted to add a well and septic system, they could. And that's kind of what we're faced with here, where the lot has come on the open market. We've had some interested parties. Obviously, we have an interest in not adding to the number of private well and septics within this area. because of how close this is to the actual municipal wellhead. So the building is, kind of where the cursor is, and there is a large wellhead that literally goes down a few hundred feet to provide municipal water to our 27,000 residents and 50,000 during the day. So, we do definitely think that this is an important acquisition and fully support it because of that. But I'll send you the actual recharge information.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of data. Actually, Commissioner Arnson is very well versed in water, groundwater, and in that area. Actually, all of central Wisconsin at the very least.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the audience or online? The motion is to recommend to council approval of acquisition. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved, recommended for purchase. The next item, item number 8, is a request to acquire a portion of property located at 215 Maple Bluff Road with parcel identified in your packet. Sorry, I'm a little dyslexic.
So we thought Forest Creek was done, not quite. This is a partial acquisition of a north corner of the property at 215 Maple Bluff Road. This is for the purposes of extending Evelyn Court to Maple Bluff Road. We did work with the current property owner. We have come to a acquisition price with them that'll be going before finance next week for their consideration. It's about 312 square feet. We would acquire that dedicated as Evelyn Court right-of-way, and then do as we've planned within the subdivision, and that's extend Evelyn Court to Maple Bluff Road. So again, because this is acquisition, it does require Plan Commission review and recommendation to the council. Staff does recommend approval as presented.
Commissioners?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Seconded by Nebo. Discussion there. Comments from the audience or online? Seeing and hearing, sorry.
Is there a reasonable alternative to, that exit? I know it was very contentious.
The alternative, I think, would have to be probably affecting Outlot 1 and making the access point a little more awkward. If you're familiar with Rice Street and Division, where you have a greater than 90-degree turn, that's what you'd be looking at as an alternative. Not the safest or desired, really. This acquisition makes it pretty simple. It's not a contested acquisition. So I think we're okay here.
Okay, thank you.
Alderperson Nebo?
I've seen around where there are blind driveways coming onto a state highway or a county highway, and mirrors can get put up so you can see traffic coming to make those kinds of intersections safer. I think if there would be any need to do something like that, we could probably do that.
Staff can certainly look at that.
If it's needed. I don't know that it is based on the curve and all of that,
Yeah.
or a flashing light, caution, blind access point, some way. There would be ways to let people know that there's an access point there.
Yeah, a few things. Obviously, Maple Bluff Road dead ends on the north side of this, so it's not like you have this extensive collector street aspect of a lot of traffic. It's minimal traffic. And actually, where Evelyn Court comes out, if you haven't had a chance to walk it, it is marked, so feel free to go and take a look. Also, check yourself for ticks when you get done. But if you're in a vehicle, you literally have great vision both to the left and to the right because of how the road is angled and how you're approaching it. As we had mentioned previously, that if there becomes a concern about traffic safety, a three-way stop is not unreasonable for this area. So if we would have to do that, we definitely work with the town of Hull because Maple Bluff Road is their right of way, but we'd work with them to potentially do a three-way stop, which would address, I think, some of their traffic safety concerns. Sure.
Okay, any comments from the audience or online? The motion is to recommend acquisition to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that recommendation will move forward. Item number 9 is a request from the City of Stevens Point to enter into a distribution facilities installation easement with Wisconsin Public Service Company for a property located at 2000 Riverview Avenue with the parcel identified in your packet. Director.
Fairly straightforward. The Holsky Park is getting a number of updates, and it's actually really coming together nicely if you haven't had a chance to go through it. But obviously, we want to provide power to our bathrooms, and so because of that, Public Service will run power, but they would need some type of easement. That's becoming more standard, especially on public property for that. So the request is before you for the easement agreement. Similar to our acquisition and disposition of property, any easements over city-owned parcels also have to be reviewed by this body and recommendation to council. So staff does recommend approval as presented.
And I'll add a few things here too, because this is a very unique solar installation, the first of its kind in the entire state of Wisconsin. The structure will actually be solar panels. So this easement also allows us, as the director tells me, we'll probably be generating more power there than we can use at one time. So we'll likely be selling power back to the grid too. With that, I need a motion. Alderman Kneebone?
Move approval.
Thank you. Seconded by Beacom. Discussion? Comments from the audience or online? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that's approved. Item number 10 is a request from the City of Stevens Point to enter into an electric overhead and underground easement with Wisconsin Public Service for 5498 Gala Road with the parcel identified in your packet. This is to service the Forest Creek subdivision. The director?
So fairly straightforward. This is just a 12-foot wide easement that's actually for the purpose of a guy wire. Those are those wires that go into the ground adjacent to overhead wires, just to keep the pole stable. Obviously, again, even though it's a very small easement, state statute requires this body to make a recommendation, so staff recommends approval as presented.
Commissioners?
Approval with the request.
Rice moves approval. Beacom seconds. Commissioner Moscoviak, did you have a question or were you trying to second?
Trying to second.
All right. Fair enough. Comments or questions from the audience or online? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that's approved. Director, report.
All right, road work began today for the Forest Creek subdivision, so the area of Walter Street and Joe Street, that's really where we're starting that project, doing the deep sewer and water distribution, and then working our way north to the actual Forest Creek subdivision. So obviously that plat was approved by the state of Wisconsin, and we are working on getting the final signatures from the appropriate parties. The residential infill program is up and running. That's a program that's managed through the department, but funded through the redevelopment authority. The whole purpose of that program is to identify the 200 or so parcels within the existing boundaries of the city of Stevens Point to encourage some type of investment from hopefully local homeowners to create more housing. That's one of the main aspects of it. And so folks that have interests in that or have questions, I would defer them to Chris Claysmith, who is the expert on that program as we get it going. The Shopko building interior demo work has begun, and we'll actually see the building begin to come down in about 2 or 3 weeks. There's some significant power distribution facilities that have to be relocated, and so that's caused a slight delay in the actual demolition of that property. But you'll see Public Service there Wednesday taking out the significant gas meter and the gas utilities next to the building, and then the power will come down in about a week or two, and you'll see again the actual demolition begin shortly thereafter. Scott Omernick has been promoted to our chief building official. He's been in that role for about a month now, and so we will be seeking to backfill his position with a part-time electrical inspector, so that will be coming through the city's personnel committee next week. And of course, please have a safe and happy 4th of July from your community development department.
Questions for the director? Director, we need to get the sheets with the permits and the valuation. Are we going to be able to expect those next month?
I am hopeful that we can have them sooner rather than later, but it's not a super high priority on our administrative assistance workload right now. Obviously, we're in the midst of our summer season, and that's when we see most of our permits being issued. So once we get caught up, we'll be more than happy to start reconciling those on a more regular basis.
Perfect. One more time, any questions for the director? Seeing none, our agenda is exhausted, and we are adjourned at 7:04. Thank you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.